Hello there, Bounce Up community. It is MJ Calloway here with your next broadcast, and I'm excited to have our guest today, Dr. Deborah Gilboa. Some people call her Dr. G, and others call her Debbie. So, welcome, Debbie. Thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you so much, MJ. I'm really excited. And I love your intro. It's really invigorating.
Yes, it gets the juices pumping there. So we're talking today about our favorite subject, which is resilience. And you have a new book coming out, From Stressed to Resilient. So if you can show that,
I'm so
yeah.
excited, you guys. This just showed up in a box on my doorstep in the last couple of days, and it's dropping on Amazon. And the reason I'm so excited about it is because it is a tool. It is a way to help yourself feel less stressed and less winded by everything that keeps happening.
And let's face it, over the last few years, we've been dealt with a lot of things that cause stress, but life in general causes stress.
It absolutely does. And one of the foundational pieces of the research that I've done is to debunk the idea that stress is always poison, because it isn't toxic. It can be overwhelming, it can be damaging. I'm a family doctor, as you know, MJ, and
Yes.
so I see all the time the ravages that stress can have on our mental health and our physical health. But exercise can be damaging, and water can be damaging, and too much sleep and too much food. The truth is that our bodies have this, and this is a sciencey term, but stick with me for a second. Our bodies
Okay.
have this physiologic range for pretty much everything: water and sodium and food and exercise, where too much is definitely dangerous and too little is definitely dangerous. But in the middle is what our bodies need to survive. And then there's a slightly more narrow range called the optimal range, which is what our bodies need to thrive, what we need to do our best. And that's not only true of food and water and sleep, it's true of stress as well.
And it's finding that happy medium or that sweet spot that you can
Right.
thrive rather than survive. I love the fact that you talk about stress, and also from your TED talk, which is very popular, is doing too much. When you say don't do too much, don't do too much. And this being an action type person, I've heard that a lot. So can you speak about the difference between doing too much and why we do need to do too much at times?
Yeah, so I figured this out, or rather, I identified this problem when I was in medical school. So I'm in med school, and during our classes, our teachers were saying to us things like, stress is the new smoking. Tell your patients they have to avoid stress if they don't want to die too young, if they want to be healthy. And I was like, oh, okay. As a medical student, I'm just taking it in. And then right after class, they would say, you should be leading more clubs. Be sure to sign up for research projects. You also may need to get a part-time job to be able to have the financial resources you need to apply to residency. And don't forget to have a personal life and keep your family going. And I thought, so either they're trying to kill us with stress because they don't want us to, I don't know, apply for their jobs or something, because you're always taught by doctors, right?
Right.
Or there's something not quite right about this message that stress is the new smoking. And smoking, I'm here to tell you, is only bad for you. It doesn't have a physiologic range where it's good for you. But stress, that didn't sound right to me. So that started me looking around and asking a question and looking at the people that I saw were thriving by my definition, which meant they had goals and they were trying to accomplish things in the world. And they also seemed like, for the most part, they were pretty pleased with their life. They were satisfied. They were enjoying their journey. And they didn't run away from stress. They did experience stress. It was about how they handled it that I saw the difference, not this idea that we had to run away. And there's a really important lesson here for leaders, because if you buy the fact that all stress is damaging, then when as a leader, you give somebody a new assignment or you correct something they've done or you ask them to take on a new role, you're the villain, right? You're the one with the poison that you're giving to, and
Right.
that's not it. That's not right. Leadership requires introducing stress into people's lives. So it has to be about the how and not the what.
And let's face it, we have to, in order to grow, in order to learn, we have to deal with change. And anytime we have change, we have stress.
All change is stressful. Yes, that's the thing.
Right. So it doesn't make sense. I'm chuckling when you're talking about the doctors are telling you not to do this. And whenever I was going through the cancer journey, one of the things, the first thing that the oncologist said to me is, MJ, you have 15 months of this journey. You don't have to work. You
You
can
got
go
to
and
avoid stress, MJ, to be healthy. We want you to have cancer and make sure you don't have any stress in your life.
I was like, I have to work. One, for my own mental ability. I said, but I could not imagine sitting home and only focusing on the journey. Like that didn't make sense to me. So I can understand where they're giving you one message here and giving you another message here. So
Yeah,
let's say
absolutely.
hello to Brenda and Eleni. Thank you so much for joining us. Focus on growth, absolutely. So and you're taking this from the science, the brain science behind it.
I am. Absolutely. The one of the things that I got really interested in is what our brain does in the face of, and you called it, in the face of change, not just difficulty, not just unhappiness, not just adversity like you experienced with a cancer diagnosis, but actually all change. Our brain dumps certain chemicals, and the names of them are not as important as the fact of them, dumps certain chemicals whenever it hears about a possible change, not even a definite change. And that's for one really good reason. MJ, you know that your brain has like a million functions, right?
Yes.
But it actually only has one job, and that job is to keep you alive. Good news, you are
Mm-hmm.
currently alive, right? And
Yes.
since you are currently alive and your brain knows that at some point you won't be, it is suspicious of all possible change. Change like there's a terrible new COVID variant, sure, but also change like your favorite restaurant now serves Pepsi instead of Coke. I mean, all change. It's like, wait a minute, my phone is updating its operating system. Could this be the thing that kills us? Every single change, your brain has not just one, but three reflexes, deep reflexes that you cannot turn off. You can learn to navigate them and handle them more easily, but you cannot turn them off. MJ, have you ever taken one of your kids when they were little or your grandkids for a well visit at the doctor's office?
Yes.
Okay, so picture this. They're sitting up on the table, 4, 5, 6 years old, and I'm their doctor, and I take out my reflex hammer and I tap their knee and their foot flies up, right?
Right.
They usually think it's hilarious. But if I stood right in front of your grandson when I did that, what would he do to me?
Oh, probably push you away.
Right, because otherwise he'd kick me, right?
Right.
So if I
Mhm.
stand directly in front of him and I tap his knee and he kicks me, should we scold him for being disrespectful and kicking the
Oh.
doctor? No, it is a deep tendon reflex. He cannot control it. I was the one in control of that situation. I made that happen. When leaders, and I mean leaders in work, I also mean leaders in family and community,
Mhm.
when anybody introduces the idea of a change and stand right in front of people, they're going to get kicked because the brain has these deep reflexes. And here are the three. See if you recognize them. If you hear about a change that's coming down the pike for you, right?
Right.
Let's say someone who works with you, your bookkeeper says, hey, we're changing software. In general, as long as your bookkeeping gets done, you don't really care. Still, your brain will say, wait, what could we lose? Because loss is the
Mhm.
first reflex. Do I trust it?
Yeah.
Are they making the right decision? Are they going to roll it out in a way where I won't see any bumps in the road for my work? Distrust is the second reflex.
Yes.
And then discomfort. Right now, I barely understand how I report my information to my bookkeeper, but they kind of take care of things for me. Is something going to change that's just going to be hard for me? Is it going to be uncomfortable? Do I have a new person I have to email? Do I have a new login I have to create and remember? What's going to be uncomfortable? Those three reflexes, loss, distrust, and discomfort, don't only happen when it's a surprising change, even when it's something you knew. Like when,
Mhm.
can you remember when one of your kids went off to college?
Oh, yes.
Even if you were super excited for them, so relieved that they got to go someplace they were looking forward to, you figured out how to afford it, I hope, all that stuff. there's still a part of you that's busy thinking on the loss, the
Yes.
distrust. Was this the right choice? Can they really do this? Is this my child? Am I really old enough for this? Right. And discomfort. I'm going to have to grocery shop differently. It's going to feel weird walking past their bedroom door. All of those three reflexes don't negate the excitement or the pride or the happiness you might feel, but you cannot keep your brain from going through those safety mechanisms because your brain's just trying to protect you.
Right, right. And it impacts our logic and reasoning parts of the brain.
It
So anytime,
absolutely does.
even the word change can cause discomfort and can make, I mean, it puts the brain into action, the word change. I know whenever I'm working with teams and especially the sales teams and they hear change, when you were talking about your bookkeeper, I'm thinking about every time there's a software change, with a CRM, salespeople go crazy most of the time because it's going to cause a loss of what they knew. Now
Right.
they have to learn something. And it goes back to, do they have time to do it? So
And there's the distrust. Was it really the right change? Can I get away with using the old system for a little while and nobody will know? Right? Like, is there a way where it doesn't have to apply to me right away? I can see how other people deal with it. And all of this lights up this part in the very, very center of our brains. Okay. The hypothalamus, which is responsible for our fear reaction. And we can't, and I hate to say it, but we shouldn't turn that all the way off because it does keep us alive. The way we can dim it a little bit is by having some competition in our brain. There's this thing at the very front of the brain, the frontomedial. There's this cortex. I don't want to overwhelm anybody with that terms, but there's a cortex at the front of our brain that we turn on with rational thought. We just have to ask ourselves a question, and the question that I recommend is, what choices do I have? Not even knowing, even if your answer is, I don't know, just asking the question turns on this ventromedial frontal cortex that says, okay, I'm thinking now. And we get the thinking, and it doesn't turn off the emotional response. It doesn't turn off the fear of loss or distrust or discomfort, but it brings them a little bit more into balance. It dims that response a little bit so that we can start to have a more rational response and navigate through choice, engagement in those choices, and then a reconciliation, a sort of a reunification, not necessarily a reunification with the new CRM, not even necessarily a reunification with the person who chose the new CRM, a reunification with ourselves. Because in the social science research, we define resilience as the ability to navigate change and come through it the kind of person you want to be.
Which is a better definition than what I hear a lot is adapt. I have a love-hate relationship with adapt. Who wants to adapt to the situation? You want to thrive during a situation or thrive as you're making your choices for the
My
situation.
mother-in-law of blessed memory lived alone in her home for over a decade. And she used to say, when things break, I adapt. And I was like, how about instead we change the light bulbs and get somebody to fix the fridge and all that? Like, you don't have to keep all your groceries out on the back deck. How about we change the situation more in keeping with how you want things to be? And that was what I saw all these people doing when I started to look around in med school and residency. It wasn't that people just carried more and got more and more oppressed. It's that they said, okay, this is happening now, because a lot of our stress we don't choose. And I don't want to make it sound like all of the stress that we have is from wonderful goals that we signed up for. Obviously, that's not the case. There's a lot of stress that comes at us that someone else chose or just happened. And we're not going to be able to walk away from it. We can't set a boundary and say, oh, that cancer isn't my problem. I'm not going to deal with that. That is not a workable solution. So when stress comes at you, in the rare case that it is avoidable and unhelpful, set a boundary, walk away, right? Not your circus, not your monkeys, great. But most stress is either unavoidable or a necessary part of something you want, helpful in some way. And so in those situations, what we need are the skills. And the research team that I was able to work with at Carnegie Mellon University, we did a lot of research into when we ask adults about resilience, what is that? Right? What does it mean? What do people do that looks like resilience to us? And we took, and I know you know from your work, MJ, but not everybody who's with us knows, there
Right.
are about 5 really respected, scientifically validated resilience scales that we can use to measure resilience in individual adults. Think of it like an intelligence test or any other kind of quiz,
Sure.
basically, that you can take. But these are
Assessment.
right.
Right.
These are scientifically validated assessments. And we looked at all of the 8 most respected ones. And we first just listed every question they ask in one big long list. And then we fed them through several different ways that you can evaluate questions and figured out that all those hundreds of questions are asking about 8 skills. And those 8 skills, I like the word skill because as a parent and as a doctor and as a teacher at the medical school, we can teach skills. We can't teach traits. I can't teach you to have a different eye color. And there was a belief, I wonder if you agree from your work, there was a belief for a long time that resilience was just a trait.
Yes.
You were born with it. And that turns out to be totally not the case, or else you and I would, there's no change your eye color experts out there talking about how to change your eye color, right?
Right.
If it was fixed, then we wouldn't do the work that we do, and the work that we do wouldn't be successful. It is not fixed. It is absolutely something you can grow. So when the team came back to me and said, well, there are some traits, and then there are these 8 skills, I grabbed onto that. I was like, skills, good. I can learn skills, and people can teach skills. Let's talk about those.
Definitely. And it's like social skills too fall into that. What I found, you're going from the brain science and the science behind it. My research was digging into the people that hit rock bottom. They were at the very bottom, and I will include myself in there, to cancer, prognosis, and also domestic abuse. So definitely hit rock bottom.
By most people's definition, that's more than anybody would be able to deal with, for sure.
And then what it had taken, so that's it. It's the skills. It isn't, and we learn, we grow through, you're talking stress, and I'm talking adversity. Well, you're talking adversity too, but you're right. It's those skills that we learn, we develop them because of what we have been through. So looking at it that way.
And while I know that when people go through hard things, they often pick up these skills, I want people to be able to learn them when they're not going through something horrible, when they haven't hit rock bottom, so that when they do go through something horrible, because it's always a when in life, right? We know if we live long enough, we're going to have hard things to manage. I want them to already be ahead of the curve. I want them to already have intentionally grown some of those skills. I think that if you just say, well, you know what, you'll go through enough hard things in life and you'll get better at this. That's a little bit like me saying, I want to get more fit. And somebody says, well, you'll lose your car in the parking lot and you'll wander around looking for it. And so you'll get more fit. Like, that's not a plan that I can get behind. It's too random. And it might be at the wrong time in my life, or it might be just too hard. So if we can build some of these skills, then when the hard things come along, we won't be quite as overwhelmed or winded or oppressed by them.
And what we're trying to do is give people those skills, and we all take it from a different perspective. And resilience training and resilience skills are not something a company can bring you in one time or bring me in one time, and that's it. It is ongoing training.
And MJ, just to acknowledge a struggle that a lot of leaders have, they hear this and they say, yeah, I like that. And then they look in their budget and they don't find a resilience line in their budget, right? There's no resilience line. And it takes a lot of lateral thinking on the part of the leader to realize, you know what, this is a retention issue. This is a mental health issue. This is an ESG, in terms of the social and the governance issues that come up. And if we want to improve our ESG ratings, I'm working with a couple of companies that are based in California where they're rated on ESG by the government as well as sometimes by the stock markets. And they have recognized that they can improve their social and governance scores if they do this work. But I recognize right away it's a challenge because it isn't directly sales and it isn't directly productivity, but very much. I have a good friend who was he had a high-ranking job for the state of Kentucky, and it was his job to go to the state legislature and ask for funding for schools.
Okay.
And after the person who did that for the police system spoke about all the difficulties with incarceration, and after the person who did that for their whole health system spoke and talked about all the difficulties of chronic illness and substance abuse, he went in and said, hey, if you can give me a little bit of funding, I can decrease the incarceration and the health issues too. If you can focus some in an ongoing way, as you're suggesting, on resilience, on change navigation, and on mental health, you will reduce the money your company has to spend on filling lost positions and on repairing relationships with vendors and with clients.
Yes. And it will increase productivity. It will increase performance when there is
Increases
ongoing
sales, because when you teach these skills to your salespeople, they teach them to your potential clients by modeling it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then that's in the workplace, but think too of what it does from the family perspective. When we are incorporating it in our family, we are raising better children to become better adults who end up in the workplace. So it has, when you think about it, not only in the workplace, but we're also preparing children for the workplace by teaching them the skills they need to be resilient.
And one of the things that larger companies do, and smaller companies actually can do without too much of a financial investment, but it's a little bit of a mindset shift, is to think about this in terms of onboarding.
Yes.
One of the things that I think is really important to notice about how we come at resilience as a skill or as a line item is that when we think about this, we tend to think, well, if I've interviewed and I've found the right person, they will be resilient. And, you and I are really excited that resilience isn't a fixed trait. It can be grown. The flip side of that is it can drop. And it can drop unexpectedly due to circumstances. So as a leader, I don't want you to feel like you must have picked the wrong person when somebody who seemed really resilient gets into your workforce or has been with you for a few years, was behaving in really resilient ways, and now they're not, because this is a growth commodity. It's going to have ups and downs. And the skills that you and I both teach help strengthen that so that when it goes down, first of all, supervisors and leaders recognize it more readily and they understand what they're dealing with, what the problem is fundamentally, and they have the strategies at their fingertips to bolster those skills again.
Which makes so much sense when it's explained and there's the ongoing. And that's where the ongoing training comes in. Because let's face it, leaders have a lot to deal with. And I found, at least with my clients, and I'm sure you have too, it is easier to implement when it's coming from the outside in rather than from the inside to everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
People listen more to someone outside.
There's some really good brain science research about that, actually, MJ, that when we want to get detailed advice, meaning in the weeds recommendations from someone like, I love your haircut, who did it? I want to go to someone I know and trust to get that recommendation. But when I need to think about something in a different way, something I already feel that I know pretty well in a different way, through a different lens, or to take in a new big idea, my brain accepts it better when it comes from someone I don't know personally.
Which is fascinating when you think of it.
And super frustrating for leaders trying to do internal development. Super frustrating, no question.
It doesn't work. And I had a discussion with a woman in Boston earlier today who she's looking for a sales trainer. And she said, I could do it. She is a sales trainer. She said, but nobody wants to hire me in my own city.
Right,
and
for sure.
It's crazy. It is frustrating. So it is crazy when you think about it, but
But
it
it is
definitely,
built into our neurotransmitters that
yes.
we are suspicious of the reasoning or the logic or the experience or the motivation of someone we know when they're trying to get us to have a really uncomfortable change. But we are not suspicious in that same way. It can be someone we have heard of, but it can't be someone we know well.
Which makes sense, but it doesn't make sense on both.
Which we've all seen happen, but is still frustrating and confusing.
It is definitely. Now, Debbie, you speak about burnout too. A part of this has to do with burnout.
It
So,
does.
with it, what is it? And it all comes back to change. Even though people hate that word, I like to use the word shift when I know it's going to create, the word change will create some resistance. But what is one small step that a leader can implement that can help so that his employees, his team members, they don't go down that burnout path?
One of the most surprising things, and actually I was lucky enough to be interviewed for an article in Forbes recently about a series called Burnout and Retention. And the segment I'm thinking of is the one that the author entitled Money Can't Buy You Love. The thing that surprises so many leaders is that when we ask leaders in business leaders in surveys, what's the top issue for retention, they say comp and benefits. And when we ask, especially millennial and Gen Z employees, but actually Gen X as well, just not by quite as great a margin, what are the top 3 issues? Comp and benefits don't figure in
Right.
terms of staying put, staying where they are. The biggest issue is leadership empathy. Empathy for what they're going through. And I think a big lie, I mentioned to you that I think a big lie in our society is that stress is poison. Another big lie that I see from the neuroscience side is that if you're a decent person, empathy should come easily to you. That is not true. There are
No.
7 cognitive barriers to effectively expressing empathy. 7. You can be as decent, as caring, as wonderful a person in the world. There are 7 cognitive barriers to effectively expressing empathy. And so a lot of leaders feel for their people, but because of these barriers, don't effectively express empathy. The most popular seminar that I've done in the corporate sense recent in the last probably 12 months is that one is on the 7 cognitive barriers to empathy. And
Mhm.
if you can, and so here's the takeaway point that I hope you've hung in to the end of this seminar with us, this conversation to hear. The hack that will help you the most is, even if you struggle to understand what that person is feeling, or you feel like it would mess up your relationship with them to truly show empathy, if you can simply say, you are valued, so I care about what you're going through.
Yeah.
That sentence really begins to improve relationship, prevent burnout, and aid in retention.
Well, you're given affirmation as well as acknowledging.
Yeah.
And that's really what people want to hear. People want to know that you care, that, and also that they are of value, that they do have worth behind them. We have a long message here from Dr. Rhonda. She'd like to explore shifts of growth, internal, not
You're
necessarily as a
You know
result.
what?
Okay.
Dr. Bumpensana Zimmerman, you are totally right that, you can have the most impressive to that person outside voice come in with a new idea. And if they are not tenderized and ready to hear a new idea, it won't matter. Right. So having that outside voice
Yes.
gives you a better shot with the majority of your people than it being an inside voice. But you're completely right that it takes that internal ability to be open to the possibility of a change. If I am closed to the possibility of ever changing my mind about whatever the topic is, it doesn't matter if my child comes to me in an entreaty on their knees, or the person I most respect in the universe that I've heard of and always wanted to meet comes to tell me that. If I'm not open to it, it won't work. So you're 100% right. There's not only one solution to this problem.
Agree. And thank you, Dr. Rhonda. That was a great point. We appreciate it. We're coming, this was such a fast and furious
It
conversation
was.
here. We're coming to the end of our time here. What is one, so it was great given those two statements to acknowledge and affirm. What is one last tip or message you do want to leave with our audience today?
That because resilience isn't a character trait and it's a series of skills, anyone can strengthen this at any time. So whatever your beliefs are about the people that you work with, there are going to be some that you see in general as being really pretty good at navigating change and coming through it on mission for the company and the kind of person that they say they are and that they want to be. But you probably also have some unconscious bias about some people who just don't handle change well, or they're more sensitive. So take this as great news that those people can absolutely learn one or any combination of these 8 skills and get better at navigating change.
And it's building a muscle, building stamina. You wouldn't go out and run a marathon on the very first day that
Because you
you.
could legitimately die. Right.
Yes. So it is building up to, and each piece, each skill adds to it. So great point there. Now, Debbie, how can people get a hold of you?
Well, what I would love for people to do is come see my site. I have a stress tracker so you can see about a change you are navigating. Where are you right now? And get a couple of strategies right then tailored to you and your responses. And that I'm going to put it in the chat, but that website is stressedtoresilient.com.
Okay, stressed. Can you repeat that one more time?
Stressedtoresilient.com.
All right. Okay, thank you so much for being here and sharing everything that you have in this very fast. Oh, we lost her. She's gone. Okay. So I will say to my audience there, oh, she came back.
I tried to put that in the chat and I got kicked out. Sorry.
Okay, we will make sure that I do put it in the comments. And afterwards, I was like, oh, she's there and now she's gone. So,
Right? Absolutely.
all right. And just wanted to say thank you so much. And to our audience, remember to have a bounce up day.